the Zaidi Revolution, and the rise of what is known as the Rafidah. And this covers the years 67 to about 122 Hijri. Before we begin, it's good to alert the readers that at this point, or the listeners, because I'm still used to writing articles, that I call everybody readers instead of listeners for some reason. But I will have this actually written down, and I will post it on the website for anybody who wants to return to it in a written format. The phenomenon of fabricating reports and attributing them to the Prophet was very widespread at this point, and also fabricating and attributing to Ali was very widespread. And so many of these Shia and Kufa were fabricating narrations, and these ahadith were being attributed to Ali and his children, and it was something that happened in Kufa more than anywhere else. And Kufa was where most of these Shia thrived. The city of Kufa was a stronghold of the Shia, to the extent that even the Sunni scholars in Kufa had Shi'i inclinations and biases. And this is due to the society where they lived, where everybody was constantly praising Ali and the children of Ali, and raising their status above everybody else. For example, many of them preferred Ali over Uthman, unlike many of the Sunnis outside of the city of Kufa. In fact, a lot of the Sunni scholars and Imams of Hadith would refer to the Sunnis inside Kufa as Shia, because the early Shia were in fact Sunnis who had strong biases towards Ali and had Shi'i leanings. As for the extremist Shia at the time, such as Al-Mughira ibn Sa'id and others, they kept inventing new beliefs and forming new sects, and most of these sects branched out of the Kaysanites and the original Saba'i Shia that we talked about previously. From the beliefs that were spread at this stage in history were the transmission of divine leadership that we just mentioned from one individual to the other. They formulated the belief and that the obedience of the Imams was obviously obligatory, because the Imams possess all knowledge, past, present, and future, and that the Imams have secret books and things along those lines. We also have more evidence of extremist Shia leaders claiming to be representatives of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, and then being exposed as liars, such as, for example, Khidash, who was lying on Muhammad bin Ali bin Abbas, who was a member of Ahlul Bayt, and he was lying and attributing lies to him. And then when the Shia of Muhammad bin Ali bin Abbas came to him, he reproached his Shia for falling prey to this man's lies, because that man was spreading extremist nonsense in the time of Muhammad bin Ali. So there was a trend, notice the trend, that they used to lie and attribute lies to their Imams. And their Imams would oppose this. I remind you, in the time of Uthman, how they forged letters in the time of Ali. They forged letters in the name of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And Ali had to disassociate himself from such letters. And then Al-Mukhtar, who was attributing lies to Muhammad al-Hanafiyyah had to disassociate himself from this. And now you have this guy who's attributing lies to Muhammad al-Abbasi, and Muhammad also reproached and disassociated himself from the liar. A few years down the road, also, you have Al-Hajjaj bin Yusuf al-Thaqafi. Obviously, he harassed some of the Shia who stood up to the Umayyads. A few of the Arab rebels from the Ash'ari tribe, they retreated to the area of Qum, and they occupied it. They actually killed the people that were living there, and they occupied it. They were the children of Sa'd bin Malik bin Amr al-Ash'ari. And these children, these brothers, they were Abdullah, who was known as Sa'dan, and then Abdurrahman, and Al-Ahwas, and Ishaq, and Nu'aym. They all moved there. As we said, they massacred the natives and occupied the place and gave it an Arabized name, which is Qum. They invited their cousins to join them, who are other Ash'aris. One of these brothers, who's Abdullah Sa'dan, he had an Imami son in Kufa. He had an extremist Shi'i son in Kufa. And that son was called Musa. So it's Musa bin Abdullah. This man moved to Qum and turned its people to a more extremist form of Shi'ism, even though the people already had Shi'ism in them in Qum, as we previously said, but this guy took it to more of an extreme. Still though, Qum produced Sunni scholars at that point. Some of them, because not all Ash'aris were extremist Shia, Examples would be Al-Ash'ath bin Ishaq al-Ash'ari al-Qummi, who was a Sunni scholar. And then you have Yaqub bin Abdullah al-Ash'ari al-Qummi, who was a Sunni scholar, who was also known as Mu'min al-Fir'aun, the believer from the folk of Pharaoh, because it seems a lot of his relatives were deviant Shia. So he was a pious Sunni, and he stood out with that title. Later on, the Shia would gain power in Qom and transform it into a purely Shia city. And they would kick anybody out of it who does not agree with their beliefs. The belief in infallibility, Isma, seems to have not been mainstream among them at the time. In fact, most of the Shia of the Imams, and we were talking about the time of Ali Zain al-Ali, Zaid bin Ali, bin Hussein, and Muhammad al-Bakr bin Ali bin Hussein. There was no infallibility, it seems, at the time. Most of their Shia, or the vast majority of them, viewed them simply as pious scholars who should have been rightfully chosen as political leaders, but their right was taken away from them. It was usurped. But they didn't really view them as infallible individuals. As for the rulers at the time, they were Marwanids, from the children of Marwan al-Hakam. Many of them criticized Ali ibn Abi Talib publicly on their pulpits until the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And he was the only person from the descendants of Marwan who was actually also, I think, a descendant of Umar ibn Khattab from his mother's side. And so Umar ibn Abdul Aziz gave very favorable treatment of the Shia, and he greatly honored the members of Ahlul Bayt and Banu Hashim in his time. In fact, some of the Shia Imams of our days, like Muhammad al-Baqir, he used to be an advisor of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, as is mentioned in some of the books of history. After Umar's death, obviously, children of Marwan returned to their old habits of oppressing the Shia. It was at this point in time as well that we began witnessing a lot of political activity by Ben al-Abbas, by the Abbasi Shia, or the Abbasi branch of Banu Hashim. The children of Abbas were sending the Shia to call for the leadership of Ahlul Bayt all over the distant lands. And their slogan was, Inna nad'u ila rida min Ali Muhammad. We are calling towards the one pleasing, ar-rida, the one pleasing to God from the family of Muhammad. So whoever that person that pleases God and pleases the Muslims from Banu Hashim, they wanted to appoint him as the leader. The state of affairs of the Shia remained the same from the end of the 1st century till the beginning of the 2nd century. There was not major changes as far as their theology, as opposed anything different than what we mentioned previously. Umayyad Khalifa Hisham bin Abdul Malik disliked Zaid bin Ali bin al-Hussein. Zaid had been accused of desiring political authority, and Hisham confronted him about it once, which led to a heated argument between the two. So this event is the main thing that's going to cause a lot of change right now in Shia society, as this argument that happened between Zaid and the Khalifa of the time, Hisham. Now the story of this is that Zaid came to Al-Sham, he came to the Levant, alongside many others, and they sought to receive financial help to pay off debts, to resolve pending issues. And this is a common habit. A lot of the people of repute, a lot of the people of high status, they would visit the Khalifa, travel to visit him, and the Khalifa would grant them rewards, he would give them stipend, he would give them allowances, he would give them this and that. So Zaid was one of these people who went to the Khalifa. And as we said, Khalifa Hisham heard that Zaid was outspoken and that the people were impressed by him. He was one of the scholars of Ahlul Bayt. So Hisham became jealous. When Hisham discussed this with one of his servants, the servant advised him to ignore Zaid's request and to not even grant him an audience till the very end. So basically push him back, push his appointment back all the way to the end. So that people, the entourage, the Hawashi, they lose respect for him. He wanted to ridicule him, basically. Hisham did what his servant advised. Zaid entered. He was not offered a place to sit, nor did Hisham return his greeting. Soon they began arguing, and Hisham told Zaid that he isn't worthy of the position of leadership. since his mother was a servant. And so Zaid argued back, and Zaid's argument was solid. He replied that Ismail alayhi salam was a prophet, and his mother was a servant, yet he attained prophethood, which is higher than Khilafah and Imama, unlike what the Shia of our days say. So Hisham himself was impressed by Zaid's actually quick-witted replies. Zaid gained Hisham's favor because he was outspoken. So Hisham at that point offered to fulfill the needs of Zaid and any request that he had. But Zaid was a different story. Zaid felt humiliated. He felt disrespected. He didn't want to disgrace himself any further. He didn't want to ask Hisham for anything. So he left without asking Hisham for anything. And that was the beginning of the tension between these two. In the year 121, the children of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the descendants, meaning, of Ali ibn Abi Talib, had a fight concerning the management of the Prophet's properties that they were put in charge of during Umar al-Khattab's time. If you remember, in Umar al-Khattab's time, Ali ibn Abi Talib and Abbas came to Omar asking him to be placed in charge of some of the Prophet's properties, and that they deserved, at least if they couldn't inherit it, at least that they could be put in charge of it, and they could, divide the produce of the land between themselves and between the people. No, Omar had accepted and had given them the land. And later Ali had, in the time of Uthman, he had overpowered Abbas, and Ali took over the land, basically, and Uthman granted it to Ali. And it stayed with Ali's children. So Abdullah bin Hassan bin Ali, Abdullah bin Hassan bin Ali, who was the son of Al-Hassan al-Muthanna, basically, he had a quarrel, he had an argument with his cousin, Zaid bin Ali bin Hussein. And as for Muhammad bin Umar bin Ali bin Talib, he was siding with Zaid bin Ali bin Hussein. So the Alawites were having a fight. And this happened in the presence of the ruler, which is Hisham bin Abdul Malik. These same individuals, it seems, they had previously fought about these lands in front of the governor of Medina, who at the time was Khalid bin Abdul Malik. But you get the impression that it wasn't resolved at the time. So therefore they came and disputed again in front of Hisham al-Hakam. So while in the presence of the Khalifa, a letter arrived in which one of the governors of the Khalifa, who was called Khalid bin Abdullah al-Qasri, complained about some properties he had claimed some notables from Medina owed him, and this included Zaid. So Ali's children returned to Iraq in order to resolve that situation, to resolve that dispute and to settle that claim that was made by the governor. So they left from the Khalifa and went and traveled all the way to Iraq, and Zaid was one of these people. So they went there. And when they went there, it turned out that the governor, who was Khalid al-Qasri, or he was the previous governor actually, that he was lying due to old grudges he held. So the matter was actually settled in the favor of Zaid and his friends, and Khalid was punished by the Umayyad authorities for lying. After those disputes were settled, the Qurayshis and the Hashimis returned to Medina after that was settled, except Zaid bin Ali. Zaid bin Ali and his relative Dawood bin Ali bin Abdullah bin Abbas, who was a grandson of Abdullah bin Abbas, they remained in Kufa. They didn't return to Medina with the rest of their family and friends. And we'll see next what that led to.